Well, good afternoon. Once again, I am trekking across a very godforsaken, inhospitable landscape. Because for as many times as I've driven through Salt Lake City in my life, I've actually never managed to walk across this nasty, barren landscape and never laid my eyes on this. Holy shnikes. Would you look at the size of that lake? Welcome, my friends, to the Great Salt Lake, the largest natural lake west of the Mississippi River. This thing is ginormous. 75 miles long and 35 miles wide. This lake is gargantuan. And it is salty. So salty, in fact, that I believe no fish can live inside of its massive waters. Just gnarly little brine shrimp, and even gnarlier around the thousands of square miles. Billions and billions and billions of these little flies. That right there, that is a nasty, nasty thing. Brine shrimp and larvae and flies, oh my! I don't know if you can see this, but look at the way those flies all billow up as I walk through here. Whoa! See this stuff that kind of looks like dirt or something? None of that is dirt. That is all flies and dead flies. And the flies are tiny, little mosquito, gnat-sized things. But if the amount of flies and dead flies here doesn't impress you, well, if you were standing out here, the smell certainly would. Good gracious, what an odor. Pee. Now, we've been to the Salton Sea, and we've been to Mono Lake together. Like Salt Lake, that's where a bunch of water comes in, no water goes out, so when the sun evaporates the water, it leaves behind all the salt. I'm told that if you wade out into this brine, you will actually float. You can't sink. I'm told that if you wade out into this water, you won't actually be able to swim. You won't actually be able to sink. You'll just float like a cork. I have never been so thankful in all my life to have forgotten my swim trunks. Sure, the salt might wash off, but I am not convinced that the smell would. Whoa! Look at how these guys flee! I had a bunch more of that dialogue for the ride yesterday to re-record, so I was up all night and the better part of this morning doing that. So I knew I wouldn't have too much time for filming today, which is why I decided, hey, might as well come and see the Great Salt Lake, the first wonder of the desert. After coming from Illinois and Missouri and Kansas, I have no idea why it is that the Mormons chose this place to settle. But boy, oh boy, is this place weird and sort of disgusting. Do you guys see that? Whoa! No exaggeration, when you walk through all these flies, you can actually hear them all rustling. There's billions of them. It actually sounds like wind blowing through leaves. It's creepy. Would make for one heck of a beach vacation, though, because there's no people out here. And I wonder why. Geez, look at all of those flies down there. That is sickening. The crazy thing is, as unpopular as it sounds, people from Salt Lake City do actually come here to hang out. Let's take one last look and one last smell. Oh, it smells like a really rotten egg out here. And take a walk back towards firm dry land. This dirt is very squishy and gross and full of little pits of nasty water. Ugh, slimy. But you can see little islands of higher elevation covered with the bodies of billions of dead flies and even more bazillions of little Salt Lake worms. Ugh. Now that right there, that just makes your skin crawl. It's very sticky and goopy as you walk over here. Look at that. The ground is spewing up some spew. I don't know if you guys can tell, but if you actually look at this, it's all sort of sparkling in the sunlight, like somebody poured vast amounts of glitter all over it. That would be little flecks of salt. You can see here where the water used to have its edge. There's just tracks of salt. Gooey, wet, ooh, slimeroo. Sticky salt. Just grab a slab of it, throw it on your fish and chips, good to go. Oh, I've never had so many little bugs trying to climb inside my ears. Oh my, what a desolate landscape this is. Now notice if you look around, you will not see Salt Lake City. It's actually way over there. But you will see this giant building over here. That, my friends, is Saltaire. And as crazy as it is out here, it's a very popular place. Whoa, it sounds like I'm stepping on broken glass. The Saltaire Resort has a very interesting history. Some version or other of it has existed here since the 1890s, and it was built as the western version of Coney Island. If I'm not completely mistaken, was originally at least co-owned by the Mormon Church. Mormon Coney Island. Weird. The original salt air was actually about a mile off that way to the east and burned down in the 1920s and 30s and was rebuilt as a crazy amusement park with roller coasters, the whole 9 yards. But first the Great Depression struck, then more and more fires, and eventually all we're left with is Salt Air number 3, which is used as a concert venue and actually isn't that much older than I am. Now I heard that this building was actually constructed out of a salvaged aircraft hangar. I'm not sure if that's true. Hard to tell from looking at the inside, but you can see that the exterior is all gussied up like the salt airs of old. I just figured if I was gonna look at the Great Salt Lake, why not do it at Salt Air? Pretty darn cool. They got a gift shop in there too, but it mostly just sells salt. I got plenty of salt at home. Got some at the grocery store. Well, I came, I saw, I smelled. And now it's time to make that long journey back into Salt Lake City proper. Oh, that is so much better. See, you guys saw the Salt Lake. No one in their right mind would want to settle there. But that's not the place that all those Mormons who'd come 1,000 miles overland, sometimes on foot, to find a new place to settle, decided to end their American exodus. No. This is the place they decided to do that. Look at it. It looks much better up here. What you see before you is This is the Place Monument. And according to legend, it was here on July 24th, 1847, that Brigham Young, the leader of the Mormons, who was laying ill in the back of a wagon, peeked his head out as they crested this small hill, looked out on the green and fertile parts of this valley, and said, "It is enough. This is the right place. Drive on." And so the Mormons crept down the hill and built Salt Lake City. And now they have the This is the Place monument to remind them of the tens of thousands of Mormon pioneers who crossed over the plains and over the Rocky Mountains, came out of Emigration Canyon down there, stood here, and gazed down at Zion, the valley of their destiny. Now that was one crazy journey, and if they were trying to settle as far away from other people as possible, they couldn't have done much better. Because where we are now is about 1,000 miles from the nearest settlement east, and still 800 miles from the Pacific coast. And at the time, this wasn't even part of the United States. I believe technically it was part of Mexico. Now, Mormons believe that Brigham Young had a vision and that they were traveling westward until he saw the place that he saw in his vision. Other people think that the ill Brigham Young was just tired of the traveling and thought this place is good enough. But either way, Mormon or no, the people living down in that valley are understandably very proud of their pioneering ancestors who crossed the United States on foot and carved their own country out of the desert. And so you have the This is the Place monument. And it's more than just that one lump of stone. Nowadays, this state park has a ton of statues, again pointing out that people crossed with hand carts, family after family pulling all their stuff across country. And they got a swanky visitor center here and a heritage pioneer village. Let's see what we can see. Wow, would you look at the size of that journey? From Illinois all the way across the Mississippi, across Iowa, across Nebraska, across Wyoming, all the way down to Salt Lake City. They were chased out of the old United States by mobs, crossed the landscapes in winter and summer. Many nearly froze to death or starved. I don't care what church you go to, that is pretty hardcore. I had to go down in the basement to find that map. The upstairs of the visitor center is all one gigantic gift shop. Would you look at the size of that selection? Holy moly, that's a lot of products. I was expecting some gifts, just not this many. Oh, check out the statue here. Brigham Young, colonizer of the West. That's a handsome likeness. Okay, got my wristband. Now this place closes in less than an hour, but I bought myself a wristband anyways, because who knows if I'll ever get another chance to peek at it. This here is their heritage village, featuring replicas of historic buildings in the area, teaching people about the early pioneers. Must have been a pretty crazy thing to cross all those mountains and prairies, and then get here and have to build your own house. They moved this cabin here that was built in 1864. It's crazy to think of when this was first put together, the Civil War was going on. Maybe that's why they built their house out of Lincoln logs. Now, Brigham Young might have been crazy enough to move his followers all the way out to Utah, but he was no fool. He knew the United States was expanding, and that no matter how far they went, eventually they'd be overtaken. No one was going to let them actually get away with having their own country out here. So what the settlers eventually proposed just a few years after arriving was the creation of their own state, the state of Desolation. Well, apparently this really upset and freaked out Washington, D.C. They didn't fancy Brigham Young becoming something of an American emperor out here. So just 1 year later, this officially became the Utah Territory. But since the vast majority of settlers in the new Utah Territory were LDS church members, and Brigham Young was their absolute leader, he was still basically the de facto ruler of Utah. As a matter of fact, for the first 7 years of the Utah Territory, Brigham Young was the governor. So even though in theory they were now subject to the rule of the United States, the Mormons basically had their own country out here. And that is what makes this place so deliciously fascinating, even if you're not a Mormon. Man, this heritage village is huge, and most of these little buildings have people inside to teach you about various trades. Like over here in this cabin from the 1870s, you've got the tinsmith. Whoa, a lot of tin stuff in here. Everything that we now make out of plastic would have been tin back then. Got everything in here but the Tin Man. I'm always impressed by people who can make things with their hands. I can't make anything except for trouble.
I bet you could.
That is pretty wild. This is a place I'd love to explore more when I have more time, but even just getting a quick peek is pretty cool. We don't have anything like this in Southern California. At least not anything anywhere near this extensive. Look how many cabins they have that are actually from the 1860s, 70s, and 80s. Awfully Spartan living in a log cabin with only the furnishings you either brought overland 1,000 miles or the stuff you could make yourself out here. That is one uncomfortable bed. They gotta head over to sit and sleep. Here's a cabin from the 1850s. What's really wild about all this is that a lot of the descendants of these early pioneers still live in the local area. So it's not only mind-blowing that these buildings survived, but it's also crazy to think that people could come in here and see their great-great-great-great-great-grandpappy's cabin. Oh, look, they got a family portrait up on the wall. Had a lot of members of families like that. Some of the men folk around here had a number of wives, let's not forget. And even today, Mormons are known for having many children. Oh my gosh, they had so many they left one behind. Oh, must be nice to have spares. Polygamy, or having more than one wife, is no longer a thing practiced by the mainstream Mormon church. It's also, I believe, technically very illegal. But it was something that was pretty widespread among the early Mormon pioneers, and kind of helps explain how they were able to have so many children to fill up this valley with. Now, I'm a red-blooded American male, but I gotta tell you, I'm glad that polygamy is no longer allowed. I just have the one lady in my life, and she's already more than I can handle sometimes. You married people will know that an angry spouse is no good. Now imagine having 10 angry spouses. No thank you. Look at that. There go some horse riders. These kids are so lucky. I only went horseback riding once a long time ago, and they made me wear a bike helmet. I don't remember how old I was, but I gotta tell you, older than them. Old enough for it to be very embarrassing at the time. Oh, what the heck do we have here? Look at all of these tiny buildings. Well, what do you know about that? Some of these houses are only an alley and a half tall. I don't even think some of these doors are even one alley tall. Would you look at the minuscule size of this house? Look at this itty-bitty little store. This is where you buy your very small jars of jams and jellies. Oh, that stings. I knew the Mormon pioneers came from a variety of different backgrounds, but I didn't know there were Hobbit Mormons. Now that is what I call one small town. Oh, look, they've even got their own little wooden train. I choose to have a good time in Utah. Ow. Nothing I love more than a miniature train, except a good caboose. More original full-size cabins. Ooh, and an original Mormon outhouse. Oh, yep, don't go in there. You know, all in all, this is a pretty cool place. You got historic buildings and replica buildings and miniature buildings. Old school irrigation. They got sheep, tons and tons of chickens. And look at these little ponies. Look at all these hungry guys. Now that's the way you feed a pony. Look at all these sheep over here. Ba-ram you. Ba-ram you. Whoa, it worked. Matt? Who's Matt? Look at them all following me like a bunch of sheep. Oh, they got baby goats too? You gotta be kidding me. This is utterly fascinating. But I can see now that no-good cheating blacksmith's closing up his shop. I guess that means it's time for us to be moving on. Gotta say goodbye to the miniature donkey here. Goodbye, little fella. You were such a nice friend. See, the trick to making friends with animals is stand by the food. All right, that's the end of the Heritage Village today, but not the end of my Salt Lake City or my Mormon sightseeing. I think now it's time to head down to Salt Lake City proper. Wait a minute. What the heck? So that's why Brigham Young came here. To open up Brigham's Donuts. What in the world? Oh, look at the sign. Come inside for a little bit of sugary heaven. Now, I'm personally not a Mormon, but isn't that a little sacrilegious? Well, maybe, but it's very punny. Good puns or not, it's time for me to head down the road back to Salt Lake City proper while there's still a little bit of daylight left. Okay, well now we're in Salt Lake City. Look at that. That is the headquarters of the Mormon church right there. Whoa. And in the background, you can see their temple. But I'm down here looking for a landmark that's a little smaller than this. Yet it's just around the corner. Literally just a half a block up the street. And somewhat awkwardly wedged between these residential buildings here is the Mormon Pioneer Memorial. So we're staying within our theme. But although today it may be a memorial to Mormon pioneers, it didn't start that way. Down here in the back of this small park is the grave of none other than Brigham Young. Like I said the other day, and it bears repeating, I neither promote nor disparage any faith. I get along with everybody. And that would include the Latter-day Saints. And look back there in the corner. Seems like it would be right here, but no. This right yonder is the grave of the one and only, one-of-a-kind Brigham Young. Look at that. He lived from 1801 to 1877. That's 76 years. So he didn't die Brigham Young. He died Brigham Old. Prophet, pioneer, statesman. And the center of one of those only in America type life stories. Look at that. His grave is pretty plain. Seems as if there's quite a few other graves here as well. Marianne Angel Young, Lucy A.D. Young, Eliza R. Snow Smith. It's a whole graveyard here. Now at the moment this looks weird because there's a building right there and a parking lot down next to where Brigham Young is buried. But at one point this whole neighborhood was Brigham Young's backyard, which I'm guessing looked a lot less weirder than having the graves right up against, you know, that. As a matter of fact, Brigham Young's house was just around the corner down there. And I'm going to time how long it takes me to walk there. Well, less than 2 minutes in, and we're already back down to the Mormon temple, which was essentially built in Brigham's backyard. In less than 4 minutes total, we walked from Brigham Young's grave to his house, or should I say, his houses. This giant building right here is called the Beehive House. Look, it goes from right there to right now and stretches on for quite a ways down the block. That is one ginormous house, but you gotta come all the way down here to this other peak to see the other house, the Lion House, named after the lion right there. See it? See it? Looks awful small, don't it? Well, do not be deceived by the front. Come around the side and look at that. Holy moly. You see, both of these houses were Brigham Young's and his family's. And look at the size of the Lion House. This one was built for his wives and children. You see, old Brigham had 55 wives and 57 children with at least 24 of them. He was a very busy bee. Maybe that's why his other house is called the Beehive House. The Beehive House itself was Brigham Young's official residence, especially while he was the territorial governor, and his offices were in those little buildings in between the two houses. Now, you remember how I was telling you Brigham wanted his own state of Deseret? Well, I just overheard one of these tour guides say that Deseret is some kind of Book of Mormon word for a honeybee. That's why the little beehive up there. And because this was the governor's house, that's why the Beehive State. I guess it's just a coincidence that with 55 wives and 57 children, his house must have felt like being in a beehive. Yes, sirree, old Brigham was a big fan of bees. And judging by the number of bees in front of this house here, the bees are pretty big fans of old Brigham Young. They certainly are nice houses, and I wouldn't mind living in either of them. But I wouldn't want 55 wives. Imagine if you came home late. Just think of all the explaining you'd have to do. Brigham, you got some explaining to do. Now, all of this is fascinating to me, but where I get really excited is the Mark Twain connection. See, on Mark Twain's way to Nevada with his brother Orion, they stopped here and met with Brigham Young in the Beehive House. That means Mark Twain probably would have walked up these very steps and into Brigham Young's office. He also wrote a fictionalized comedic parody of the meeting in his book, Roughing It, where he mostly makes his fictional version of Brigham Young talk about all his troubles having so many wives and so many children. It's actually, honestly, pretty funny. And since I always go where Mark Twain goes, to the Beehive House, I had to go to come to be. Oh, there you go. It's nice to be here. Ooh, free admission. Mark Twain was here. Wow. Get a tour. I think we're heading into the office. Sweet. Whoa, look at the size of this room. Our tour guides are trying to explain about Brigham Young, but I just keep thinking, Mark Twain met him in here, in his private office. That's the original guest book. I wonder if Mark Twain's signature's in there. So weird to think that Mark Twain was here. Ooh, now into the house. Right away, one of the ladies said that Brigham Young was her great-great-great-grandfather. So this is your grandpa's house, kinda.
Yeah. Wow. So your grandpa's right here. Yeah, it's right here. Young.
Wow. After that, they showed us room after room after room in the Beehive House. Pretty awesome. That was awesome. Just a word of warning though, if you go in there, they will talk to you about the Book of Mormon. Bear in mind, it was a small price to pay for a free tour of Brigham's house. And that house was the bee's knees. All right, well, it's getting late, and once again, I've stood somewhere that Mark Twain stood. So I feel like I've done my duty, and I can move on to seeing other parts of Utah. But the best way to leave Salt Lake is to come out here through Brigham Young's backyard and take a farewell gander at the hub of the Mormons. Wherever you come from, whatever you believe, it's been a pleasure having you with me today. We've got many more adventures of all kinds ahead of us, so check out the links below, make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you in Randomland. Bye-bye. I totally forgot. The whole reason I walked from Brigham Young's grave to Brigham Young's house was to underscore something from an old video, and I completely forgot to mention it. You see, there's this crazy urban legend that the hearse in front of the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland was actually the hearse used to carry Brigham Young to his grave. But that's actually ridiculous because they didn't use a hearse at all. It turns out they carried him, and as you saw, the grave and the house where he died, very, very close together. And so I was gonna throw that back to an old video where I explained the whole thing and busted the whole Haunted Mansion hearse myth, but I completely forgot. So, success! Hey, you guys see my friend Julio around here? Why won't you answer me, you chicken? I'm sorry about that joke, ma'am. I had to. Oh, oh, oh!